Behold, it's my glorious supporter Flip's birthday today. Flip says, starting on Zandy's Patreon is something of a birthday gift to myself, so I'll be saving watching this Parley video until the 26th if it comes out before then. So naturally, we have to pre-upload it ahead of time. It's the 7th for me, and put it up on the 26th. So when you're watching this, it's the 26th or later. Welcome if you're from the future. And Flipz asks a complicated question. Basically, it's this. How good are set mods if you only get the set bonus if you use the entire set and you have no other vanilla sources of effects on the set mods in the game? I'm going to explain what that means, but basically, you're asking about set mods. Flipz asks for some sort of analysis or tier list for the set mods, but only from the perspective of set mods needing to be equipped as a complete set to have any function at all. Ooh, we'll get back to that. The stats boosted by each set mod are the only source of that stat aside from corrupted mods, i.e. stretch doesn't exist because there's auger reach for that, but overextended is fine because it comes with a downside. And 3, if there are potential ways to stack an increase of a stat via multiple sets, using both Gladiator and Karnus, for example, the game prevents the offending mods from being equipped at the same time, in the same way that you can't equip a normal mod and its primed variant at the same time. Mods within the same set are exempt from this restriction. Okay, so again, that sounds complicated, but it's basically this. Now already, there's one thing we need to kind of fork. We need to decide something to answer this. So you said the set mods must be equipped as a complete set to have any function at all. So I wrote only get set bonus with full sets. That's a little bit different. If you meant the set mods don't do anything, they don't even do their normal effect if you don't equip all of them, that is pretty simple to answer. The game would suck because it would be basically mandatory to equip all of all sets, and otherwise you would have nothing. Like, you can't mod for any power stat unless you use either corrupted mods or you run all of them. So you can only ever make a generalist build or like a bunch of corrupted mods, or some corrupted mods. You know, if you want the duration mod, because it's only auger message now, we have no continuity because of the second rule. If you want strength, there's no umbral intensify anymore. You can only use auger, whatever it's called. You can't have stretch, only auger reach. So if you want some strength or some duration or some range, you have to run all of them. You need to run all 3 of those things. And for example, auger message doesn't give you very much duration. So you basically just have to sacrifice a mod slot to generalist builds are basically just dead. You cannot make good generalist builds anymore. A lot of types of builds are basically dead. So I hope you'll forgive me if I interpret the first thing as being that the set bonus doesn't activate unless you run the whole set. Because if you interpret it as the mod card is blank unless you run the whole set, the game is basically destroyed. Like, there's no, everything is bad because, I mean, all the set mods would be god tier, but it would be horrible. Like, everybody would hate that. That's the worst. So I'm going to assume that's not the case. We're assuming that the set only works if you equip all of it. The interesting thing about that, though, is that it actually doesn't change that much. Without any of these restrictions, let's just take that away for a sec. Let me just say what I think of all of the sets, and then I'm going to add those restrictions and do it again. Okay, so we have the ones from Plains of Eidolon, so that's the Vigilante set, the Gladiator set, and the Augur set. Okay, the Vigilante set, we have a multi-shot mod that is kind of a core mod for primaries. Now remember, with this second rule, with your criteria, there is no other multi-shot mod for primaries. But again, we're forgetting about that for a sec. It's a good multi-shot mod for primaries. So you already have a little bit of the Vigilante set. I think the most interesting result of this first rule, where you only get the set bonus with a full set, is that it causes there to be this odd feeling of marginal benefit if you run the rest of the set, because for a lot of these sets, you're implicitly running a few of them pretty often. If you're using a primary, there's a very good chance you have Vigilante armaments on, and there's some Vigilante mods that are Exilus mods, meaning you could pretty easily have like 3 or 4 of the set. And then suddenly it's like, so you're saying if I run just 2 more, I get 30% or whatever chance to enhance criticals? that's pretty good. You know, that means that if one of the two remaining mods is like okay, and the other one is just terrible, it does a lot. Adding that sixth mod, suddenly it's like, whoa, you get this thing. This is something that is interesting about sets in most kinds of games, where they give you this consideration where it's like, well, maybe I'd be willing to run more, even if it isn't always exactly what I want, because then there's this trade-off where I get this big set bonus for running a whole set. And then occasionally you run bits and pieces that are not part of the set. I think all that stuff is overall pretty good. I think that's a decent thing for the game. And I'll be talking at the end of this video about how some current sets, kind of already do the thing you're describing, but a lot of them don't. And a really good example of the ones that don't do this thing are the Plains of Eidolon, the Vigilante, Gladiator, and Augur sets, because these are not a set at all. The mod just does what it says on it. The Vigilante Armaments mod just gives you 5% chance to enhance criticals. It doesn't have anything to do with how many of the other mods you have equipped. They're only a set in that they all do the same thing. They all have a uniting effect, and then they have some other effect. So for sets like that, I think that it changes a lot. The Vigilante set is pretty okay overall. We're not talking about the whole set, just like what overall among the mods, how do I feel? Vigilante set's pretty okay. There's a few good mods. Vigilante Supplies is like basically just better ammo mutation, because ammo mutations are usually unnecessary. You don't need them at full strength, and this one gives you a chance to enhance criticals, so that's fine. Vigilante Armaments is good. There's Vigilante Pursuit is like an enemy radar mod in the Warframe Excel slot, but it also gives you a chance to enhance criticals, so that's fine. Like, you might as well, if that's what you want in the Excel slot, you might as well use that. So yeah, like a few of them are okay. The Gladiator set, very good set bonus. Quite a few of the mods are like okay as well. You have basically Prime Fury, but a Gladiator set mod, or it's a little worse than Prime Fury, but it's basically Fury, but a Gladiator set mod. Gladiator Rush is a core, one of the main options for combo duration on combo-based melee weapons, and it gives you some crit chance. Now, if you could only get that set bonus if you equip the whole Gladiator set, that's different. But assuming, again, we're rating them just as they are, that's a pretty good option. It gives you a fourth of a Blood Rush and combo duration. That is often better than Drifting Contact, so good. And then here's the part where we also have to talk a little bit about, Sentinels can equip a set and then be running like a bunch of the mods for that on their weapon. And a lot of the time that allows you to get most of the set basically for free, because it can just be on your Sentinel. And a lot of the time the mods are actually not half bad on the Sentinel anyway. You can run 3 of the Vigilante mods on your Sentinel's primary weapon, and it's not like bad. Like, the primary weapon can still be useful, especially for applying status, but even for damage. There's a fire rate mod. I think that might be Vigilante Pursuit. Anyway, you know the name, you know what I'm talking about. The Sentinel weapon is going to want the multi-shot, want the fire rate, and wouldn't mind the punch through. And then you've got 3 of the 6 Vigilante set bonuses already. So again, if you add this rule where you need to equip the whole set, there's this interesting thing that happens where now you even more want to have the set mods on your Sentinel weapon, because that means that you can more easily equip the whole set and cash in that larger bonus. The marginal benefit of running the whole set is high, which means that the marginal benefit of running a bunch of the set not in your main build is even higher than it was before. And it will now be basically nonsense not to run set mods on your Sentinel weapons. And then the Augur set, a lot of these are not great, but they, in their current form, they allow you to have more options for like building some strength, building some range, etc. With your second rule, that would not be the case, because it would mean that it's the only source of that thing. The max amount of strength, duration, range that you can get would go way down, because they're now the only source of that. That would be a lot. In fact, for some categories, like range, for example, you lose 2 mods if you count Cunning Drift. We lose Stretch and Cunning Drift. For strength, we lose Umbral Intensify, which can be a lot. So that's a lot. But in their current form, they're a nice little supplement here and there. Again, they're not really good as sets because they're not really a set. Then we have the Umbral mods. This I've talked about a lot at length. They basically bully each other into viability. Umbral Vitality and Umbral Steel Fiber, Umbral Fiber, are not really worth using unless you have Umbral Intensify. But you usually do, or if you have the other one. So if the frame wants Steel Fiber and Vitality, there you go. If the frame wants Umbral Intensify and is going to use Steel Fiber or Vitality, there you go. So it's pretty rare that they're not powerful in some way, or at least Umbral Intensify. And removing their set bonus would, unless you equip all of them, would put a damper in that. There are way less builds that want to run all of them rather than just 2 of them. And although it doesn't affect Umbral Intensify, but that's okay because Umbral Intensify has been removed unless you equip it alongside or without the Augur mod that increases strength, which I guess you would all the time unless you're running that set. Yeah. So that's interesting. Then we go to the sets for Kubros, Kavats, and such, the tech set, the mecha set. The mecha set is pretty good if you run a little bit of it and if you run a lot of it, but it's not good if you run only one most of the time. Mecha Overdrive is kind of already on most Kubros because it gives them really good status output, and they have Slash, so they can kill enemies with armor. That is a pretty solid set overall, a really good example, maybe the only example, of a set where it feels good and is reasonable to equip one mod in the set, or a few mods in the set, or the whole set. It doesn't feel like it's nonsense to do one of those things. It makes sense sometimes to do all 3 of those things, which is good. I think that's nice. Although which of the mods is good on its own does vary. There's that one that gives shield recharge for your Kubro, which is terrible. There's that one that gives you armor based on how many enemies are killed by the mark from the mecha set. That's really bad unless you have like 2, 3, or 4. It's not good on its own. The Aura mod is not good if you don't have a lot of the set, and even then it's not amazing. So it's not perfect, don't get me wrong, but definitely a decent set. The tech set's pretty bad if you're not familiar. It creates a zone randomly, a little glowing zone, and then the tech set interacts in various ways with that zone. If you slam attack in it with the melee mod in the set, then you do a pull, but the pull is tiny. The enemies literally go they just stagger, do a little shuffle forward. It's a pitiful pull effect, and it requires so much setup. It's terrible. There's another one that gives you crit damage while you're inside the area. That's good, but you need to rely on the area being somewhere you want to shoot enemies from, which is not possible because it spawns randomly. No, but I guess it's, automatic. So that's one where I don't really feel the set has effects that are worth using for the set. The set is just not a reasonable effect most of the time. I think if it was always where your Kavat was attacking, or always right near your Kavat, or maybe it is, I haven't used it in a little while, but I remember when I used it before, it felt very random. But there are good tech mods. The 2 tech mods for Kavats are pretty much an auto-include on most Kavat builds, except for the Vulpaphilas. But even then, Tech and the Tech Assault, the one that makes it invulnerable at the end, can be okay. The Vulpaphilas can come back with their larva form. But anyway, on Adarza and Smita Kavats, and arguably on Voska Kavats, it makes a lot of sense to use Tech Assault. And then on Adarzas and Smitas, you want Tech Enhance as well. So good overall, not amazing. And then there are other set mods, but to make a long story short, the ones from the Cambion Drift from Deimos are a little funky. I think these are the ones that are the closest to, as we go through these, the closest to making sense in this paradigm that you created, where the problem with a lot of the Deimos set mods is that, so they're very formulaic. They all follow this format where there's a Carapace mod, which is a weaker Vitality and a weaker Steel Fiber combined together. So that mod, if you can't equip Steel Fiber and Vitality because of these rules, that mod makes a lot more sense because it's just the only option. And then it would be you pick which of the sets you want, because there are 3 different Carapace mods for the 3 different sets, Carnus, Saxum, and Jugulus. And then there's a melee mod and a secondary mod. The secondary mod is status and then a type of physical damage, which is not very good, but not terrible. I mean, they're vanilla status mods, I guess. You're just not that good a lot of the time. And then the melee mod is also questionable, but then the set effects are sort of interesting. Not amazing, but interesting. They could be balanced better. and then they could be interesting. They're not like bad effects. They're just things that the numbers might need to be different is all. So I don't know. I mean, overall, this is a tricky question because you're really changing the game a lot when you say the sets only do something if you equip the whole set. And so what I want to talk about a little bit is how at the moment the sets all have this kind of different design philosophy behind them. And what you're doing is, on the one hand, you're kind of uniting the design philosophies. You're saying all of the sets are things that you equip all together. So on the one hand, that helps because it defines what a set mod actually is much better. On the other hand, you've kind of created a situation where it's mandatory to use sets all over the place, and you really don't think about running the sets on their own very often. You really want the whole set. Again, it kind of depends a lot too on what you mean by this first thing. If the set mods must be equipped as a complete set to have any function at all, or just to have their set bonus, that changes a lot. If you assume it's only to have their set bonus, that's kind of okay because then you can just run a range mod and it's fine. But if you can't have a range mod unless you run all the other augur mods, that's very bad. But it would make the sets really good, sure, but not in an interesting way. You would virtually always be running the entire augur set, for example. There would be very little, it wouldn't make much sense not to most of the time. But I'm sure there'd be some situations, but the umbral set, for example, I think you would want a lot of the time, except that it would conflict with the augur set, and now you can't run vitality or steel. If you interpret it as set mods don't do anything, they're just a blank card unless you run the whole set, I would say the game just breaks. It doesn't really work. You can't really do that. It would make the game impossible to mod for a lot of stats. But there could be interesting, except that there'd be no diversity, where you really can't equip the umbral set, and so you have to use the augur set and then Carnus Jugulis or Saxum, but then one of those is kind of just better than the others, and so you'd end up just always equipping that. Anyway, you very quickly just get a bunch of mandatory mods. But you didn't mention why you asked this way, so I am going to take a gander at what the purpose of discussing this might be, even if you don't have one in mind and you just wanted to finagle with me with this question, which is, you said, no, I totally didn't spend all of September thinking up a sufficiently oddball scenario for this. Okay, maybe it's just to troll me, which is completely fine, but what this makes me think of is how set mods are not really united in their purpose. What I would really rather do is just fix the ones that aren't set mods. So for the Vigilante set, for example, you don't get the bonus chance to enhance crits unless you run the whole set in your system. I don't like that because it means that it doesn't really feel like a partial set really leads you into it. And I think that what provokes the audience, the player's imagination, is when a little bit of the set, running just a few of them together, which you might just do on your own, that gives you something. And then you think, maybe I could run just one more, rather than saying to the player, you need 6 or you get nothing. And rather than what the Vigilante set mod actually does, which is you don't need any of them to get anything, and the word set mod is just confusing on those mods. So what I think you want to do is you make the set bonus more powerful, and then you make it ramp up. You make it an actual set. So for the Vigilante set, right now you get 5% per mod. So and 30% if you run the whole set. So let's increase that to 50% if you run the whole set. And you're going to get less, you're going to get more the more mods in the set you have equipped. So you start with 5% or 3% per mod for the first mod. And then if you have 2, then they each give 4%. If you have 3, then they all give 5%. If you have 4, then you get it. You increase how much each mod gives. The whole thing about a set bonus is that it makes the marginal benefit of each mod in the set higher if you equip them together. If that doesn't happen, it's not a set in any meaningful way. Now, something I always give as an example when we talk about this is the mecha set has kind of an odd solution for this, where it doesn't really... it doesn't exactly get more powerful. Like, it linearly gets more powerful, but because of the way that it gets linearly more powerful as you equip more mods in the set, it ends up being multiplicatively or exponentially more powerful. Um, so the mecha set marks an enemy, and then when you hit the mark, it copies the status to every enemy in range. The marks happen both more often and explode in a larger range as you add more of the set. So what happens is that you're getting a bigger effect, so you have a multiplier on how many enemies it affects. That's linear, but you also have a linear bonus on how often you get the marks. So now the amount of enemies affected, or the amount of square meterage affected by the mecha set, is increasing by multiple factors, multiple linear modifiers, multiple multipliers, every time you add a mod from the set. I'm no mathematician, I don't know the right word for that, but it doesn't matter, you understand. And the critical thing is that they found a really good way with that set, maybe by accident, maybe by doing every single option, or maybe on purpose, to create a situation where you can put on some of the set and it still does the thing. It's not like it doesn't do a thing that's powerful, but it is appreciably a set. Building into it does more. Another thing that those do is the effects of the mods interact with the set. Like, the Vigilante set is just like some random mods, and then they like also have this united effect that just has nothing to do with what their set bonus is, you know? So, for example, like the Vigilante mod that gives you enemy radar, and then it just gives you enhanced criticals. Like, they don't, you know, with the mecha set, a lot of the mods are directly related to the effect, or they're ideologically related. So the aura mod gives you more damage to the marked target, and with only one mod in the set, the aura mod, you would have a marked target, just not that often and not for very long, and it wouldn't spread in a large area. So it still does something, but that effect is obviously much better as you get more of the set. Now, you don't get that much more damage to the affected target, so it's not that good. But anyway, it's an example. There's a core Warframe mod that gives you armor for every enemy hit by the set when it goes off, which I mentioned before. That mod obviously gets better the bigger the mark is and the more often it is. If you run the entire set, then the mark has no downtime. Well, the buff from the mark, the armor buff from the mark, has no downtime. That means that you always have the armor up. If you run 2 of the set, it's usually up, which is, you know, and so you get a feeling for like how much of this you're investing in to get how much of an effect from each of the mods. It makes the set mods better. And that's synergy, rather than just artificially saying, if you run these things, they just get more powerful. You're adding effects that actually give synergy between each other. Now, it's kind of both. It directly gets more powerful, and there's synergy, but I still think that's really good. Overall, I think set mods in Warframe are a really mixed bag. I'm very interested to see if we get the MOA set mods. That is something we don't have. Maybe we're not even going to get them. There's also an open question about whether the synth set mods are supposed to be equipable on every type of companion or not. I can't find a patch note where they documented that they became available on non-robotic companions, non-sentinel companions. There's a picture of a sentinel on the mod. When they were released, there was like a Kubro set, a Kavat set, and a Sentinel set. So it seems a little weird that they're suddenly available everywhere. There are typos in the synth mods, synth deconstruct and synth fiber. So that leads me to believe they're not intended to be available everywhere. But on the other hand, it's been there for a while, and a lot of people mistakenly believe that it would be more balanced, more fair for the other companions if that was the case. That's not true, but people think that. So, are we gonna get MOA set mods? Are we gonna get new Sentinel set mods? Anyway, I don't know. So there's some open questions there. I don't really know how to rate those. The synth set is good for what it's worth. The synth deconstruct and synth fiber are good anyway. But yeah, yeah, this was a mess. I think this is what you wanted, but it was a hot mess. Happy birthday! I hope that you had a good time with this. I had a good time with this. I just don't know. I feel like I didn't answer a question. They don't all have to be questions, of course, but yeah, there you go. It would yuck up the game a lot if you couldn't equip mods that like did the same thing. It's like, so we get rid of continuity, we get rid of those core mods like stretch because we have the set mods. And then if the mod card's just blank unless you run the whole set, the game is just upchucked. If the set doesn't do anything unless you equip the whole set, I think in some places that might even make the game feel a little bit better. Like the Vigilante set, I don't think you lose much. Might just feel better. I think the Gladiator set, running a Helios with Deconstructor to hold most of the Gladiator set, that might feel a little like boring powerful. Like it would be a good choice really often, but not in an interesting way. But for the Vigilante set, I think it might not be so bad. Because a lot of those mods you can really cram in without spending that much space, and then it's like you have this incentive to add just one more and get some crit boost. Like, that's fine. But for a lot of them, I think it fundamentally breaks the way that set mods exist in the game. So I don't think that's a good idea. As for, again, like a direct tier list for the set mods, it's hard because a lot of them, it's like not as a set. Like Vigilante, Gladiator, and Augur, most of the set is like kind of irrelevant in regard to a set, and you just like there are a few key mods. I guess most of the Augur set's pretty relevant, but like for the Gladiator and Vigilante sets, a lot of the set is just irrelevant for normal build craft. But that being said, the mods that are not relevant are really good. Gladiator Rush and Vigilante Armaments in particular are like very ubiquitous mods, but I don't think that the set is good. It's just like that mod, you know. The mecha set is pretty good. The tech set is not. The synth set, the synth mods for Sentinels are good. I don't think them being available on things other than Sentinels is good, and I don't think the other synth mods are that good. Synth Charge in particular is interesting, but not like really worth building around. It makes you jump through a lot of hoops to get a good damage bonus, but it's not really worth the time. You should just do damage another way almost all the time. So that's a thing. And then we have like the Umbral set. I didn't even mention the sacrificial mods because that's a whole can of worms. But the Umbral set, where the Umbral set kind of bullies you into equipping the rest of the set, that's weird. I've never loved that. I think what I don't like about that is that Umbral Intensify is better than normal Intensify always, whereas Umbral Fiber and Umbral Vitality are like the same as the normal one without other set mods. But then if you do have one, which you do because Umbral Intensify is better on its own, then suddenly they are better. I don't like that. I think they really ought to be all worse at first by a little bit, and then they get better when you do the thing. In particular, I can give you numbers right now. Make it so Umbral Intensify caps out at 66%, I believe, if you run the whole set. So make it go, if it's on its own, 22% strength. So it's worse than normal Intensify. With one other mod in the set, it's 44%. That's what it is on its own currently. So now if you don't equip another mod from the Umbral set, it's not better than Umbral Intensify. And then with the whole set, it's 66%. That basically fixes my issue anyway. Makes it so the Umbral Intensify mod specifically doesn't like gateway the other Umbral mods into always being better. Like it ends up being ubiquitous because it's better on its own, and then because it's already there, you're like, I might as well get a bunch of health, you know, every single time. And then the Umbral Forma thing is silly anyway. So I don't, from a design perspective, that one gets a big F from me, but the set overall is powerful. Like Umbral Intensify is powerful. That's a lot of a stat. Like Prime Continuity, you're just getting a lot of a stat without it being a trade-off. You get a corrupted mod level of a stat without sacrificing another stat, which is good, obviously. I think most builds that do things related to strength and duration are improved by just slapping Primed Continuity and Umbral Intensify on there. So, meh. Yeah, and then there are a few other concerns related to this topic, like where are the Moa set mods? The Augur set is currently, the set bonus is really good because of shield gating, but shield gating is fundamentally broken and really badly balanced. And then there is the Carnus, Jugulus, and Saxum set mods. I've been wanting an opportunity to talk about those more at length. I talked about them a little bit before. They're just kind of cookie cutter. The pistol mod in the set is not that great. A lot of the effects are just weirdly tuned, but it's an interesting idea. Anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing what you think, and if I got it wrong, please let me know and I'll respond. Thank you very much for your support and happy birthday. I'm honored to be part of your birthday gift.